Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. As you might imagine, we're going to talk about the mass shooting there in San Bernardino. We knew about it yesterday as we were entering into the second hour, did not know a great deal, wanted to continue with the interview. And of course, sometimes there's a value in waiting an extra day to learn a lot more. This is, in some respects, the best of times and the worst of times for media. Last night, as I watched some of the broadcast and listened to some of the commentary and watched and read some of the articles coming out, there were those that said, we don't want to speculate, sometimes not speculating when we think we already knew exactly what was taking place, but you have to appreciate the willingness to step back and be careful and be specific and wait till more facts come in. On the other hand, you had a number of others that use this as, once again, a justification for gun control, a justification for condemning individuals, as we saw even in the headlines of New York Daily News. So those people that would pray about this, and all sorts of tweets and all sorts of other things going out. So in the midst of this, of course, we need to think about this from a biblical perspective. And turning to the book of Romans, we see in Romans 12, verse 21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And certainly we recognize that the answer to many of the issues that we address every single day here on Point of View, and even the shooting, is the promotion of the gospel. And those individuals who died and two perpetrators who were killed will never hear the gospel if they have not heard it before and acted upon it. That is their destiny. And certainly we recognize how important it is to pray for those individuals, even if some are ridiculing those of us that do that. But at the same time, there's also a passage after we move from Romans 12 to Romans 13, verses 1 to 7, that talks about the fact that government is ordained of God. And there are some really important questions we might want to ask in terms of governmental policies. And I think it is interesting how quickly people jump to their logical conclusions. If it's those on the left, we need more gun control. If it's those on the right, we need to change our policies about Syrian refugees. Maybe for just a minute we can let those individuals that need to be buried before we gauge into those kinds of conversations. But I'm sure they will develop today, and you are welcome to join our conversation at any point as we talk about what transpired yesterday at San Bernardino. Two suspects, of course, were killed by the police after a mass shooting that took place. The individuals are Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, and they were killed in a gun battle with police after this mass shooting. Farouk, as we're going to talk about more in just a minute, traveled to Saudi Arabia earlier this year and returned with a wife, and a baby followed. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Also wrote an online profile on a Muslim dating site that says he enjoys target practice in the backyard. Yes, he does. Unfortunately, he took it out on individuals in that center as well. Farouk and his wife left, interestingly enough, their 6-month-old baby daughter with his mother in Redlands, California, telling her they were going for a doctor's appointment. You have to wonder if the time they were dressed in those military outfits and whether she didn't wonder if something was happening. 14 dead, some say 17 wounded, others say 21. We won't get into those numbers, but again, this happened at the Inland Regional Center on Wednesday. They were wearing, according to the police, assault-style clothing, 2 handguns, 2 assault rifles, all, by the way, legally purchased in the United States within the past 4 years, according to ATF. And, of course, we'll get into that issue in just a few minutes as well. There are lots of conflicting reports. So was this planned? Well, you don't have pipe bombs in your garage. You don't have people of Middle Eastern descent coming to your garage on a regular basis with packages, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, without having some kind of plan. But there is some possibility that this Christmas party sparked something and caused them to put into practice what they were still planning for the future. But we do not know. And certainly as we find out more information, we can get into that. But certainly whether he left on his own accord or was kicked out, whether he was offended by the Christmas holiday party or something else, we certainly can leave for another day. And, of course, then they were in a standoff for a while and eventually even threw a pipe bomb out of the window of their SUV before they were taken down by the police. One officer was wounded, but it was not life-threatening. The Associated Press latest report says that one moment Saeed Farouk was sitting at a table with colleagues at a holiday gathering for county health employees, then suddenly disappeared, leaving his coat on his chair. The next time his coworkers saw him, he was dressed in battle gear and wielding an assault rifle. Farouk is a county restaurant inspector, and his wife or fiancée, as some are now suggesting, killed 14 people, seriously wounded more than a dozen others in an attack that took place at that social service center for the disabled before they were gunned down, of course, in an SUV a few miles away after a shootout with the police. Federal investigators Thursday were trying to learn why the couple left behind their baby daughter and went on a rampage, the nation's deadliest mass shooting since Newtown, Connecticut, which, of course, is the school tragedy that took place 3 years ago that left 26 children and adults dead. Of course, at the White House, President Barack Obama said that the meeting with his national security team that it was possible that this was terrorist-related, but the authorities were unsure. He raised the possibility that it was a workplace dispute or that mixed motives were in play. Farouk was born in the United States to a Pakistani family, raised in Southern California, has been, of course, a employee of San Bernardino County for 5 years. The San Bernardino police chief said that he had no information on Malik's background. Relatives said that Farouk had traveled to Saudi Arabia, and that is indeed the case. As a matter of fact, we have a couple of reports that have come down. First of all, from his estranged father saying, quote, he was very religious. He would go to work, come back, go to pray, come back. He's Muslim. And I might just point out that some people might say, well, have we done something to offend this individual? He actually enjoyed more perks than most of us enjoy in our positions of employment. One of which is that he could leave the center, he would go home and pray and come back. And most Muslims pray 5 times a day, even if you assume that 2 of those were outside of work hours, obviously 3 were, and you can see that as well. Also, a sympathetic neighbor of Farouk said that maybe 2 years ago he became much more religious. He grew a beard, started to wear religious clothing, the long. Now that he was also in touch with various terror suspects. This coming also from CNN. Saeed Farouk, one half of the couple behind the San Bernardino shooting massacre, was apparently radicalized and in touch with people being investigated by the FBI for international terrorism, law enforcement said today. Farouk's apparent radicalization contributed to his role in the mass shooting with his wife Tafiq Malik. He traveled to Saudi Arabia for several weeks in 2013 on a Hajj, which is the annual pilgrimage we've talked about here on the program to Mecca that Muslims are required to take at least once in their lifetime. That didn't raise red flags with the government, but then, of course, he was able to then bring back with him on a fiancé visa this individual who became a permanent resident and was one of those involved in the shooting. Have a lot more to say about this, but I'd also love to get your comments. You've seen a lot of reports, probably have some thoughts, and so throughout this program today, we're going to give you a chance to join the conversation. The way to do that, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212, if you'd like to comment about this shooting in San Bernardino. When we come back, we're going to talk about why didn't the neighbors talk about him? Would gun control actually control some of this? And we'll get into some other issues, but we'll take your phone calls. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, the new atheists contend that religion is not just false, but it's dangerous. Sam Harris believes that it should be treated like slavery and eradicated. Richard Dawkins is even more specific. He said, I'm attacking God, all gods, anything and everything supernatural, wherever and whenever they have been invented. Much of the criticism against religion revolves around violence. We do live in a violent world, and religion has often been the reason, or at least the justification, for violent acts. But the new atheists are kidding themselves if they think that a world without religion would usher in a utopia where there is no longer violence, oppression, or injustice. Details matter when you examine religion. The recent terrorist attacks by ISIS should not be used as part of the cumulative case against religion in general, or Christianity in particular. The fact that there are Muslim terrorists in the world does not today mean that all Muslims are dangerous, and it certainly does not mean that Christianity is dangerous. Keith Ward says, no one would deny that there have been religious wars in human history. However, no one who has studied history could deny that most wars in human history have not been religious. And in the case of those that have been religious, the religious component has oftentimes been associated with some non-religious, social, ethnic, or political component that has exerted a powerful influence on the conflicts. Consider that just 3 atheistic regimes of the 20th century, Hitler in Nazi Germany, Stalin in Russia, and Mao in China, are responsible for more than 100 million deaths. Religion is not the problem. People are the problem, and removing religion and God from a society doesn't make it less dangerous. The greatest death toll in history took place in the last century in atheistic societies. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'd like to join a conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. What should we do to prevent these kinds of shootings that take place on a pretty regular basis? Our president is telling us that this does not happen in other countries. Of course, as I pointed out just the other day when he made that statement last time, not yesterday, but last time, he was in Paris where 130 people had been killed by that same kind of shooting. But nevertheless, there are certainly a lot of proposals being put on the table. Love to get your comments about that as well. Saeed Farouk, Tashfeen Malik at the Inland Regional Center yesterday. And of course, we are wanting to pray for those family members and others that have been wounded, and certainly just the horrific experience. Imagine being in that Inland Regional Center thinking you're going to a holiday party. I noticed they didn't call it a Christmas party, but that's fine. A holiday party, and all of a sudden, an individual opens fire, and even maybe in your last moments of life, you're just wondering what has happened. Or if you're wounded, as one individual said, he didn't even know he'd been shot until he saw that he was bleeding in the mirror. Others were able to find some level of escape. But those are some very important questions that obviously individuals were having in their last moments of life. And I certainly would encourage us all to be praying for those families, for those who are now doing the investigation. And before we get into some of the phone calls, because we will take those calls, 1-800-351-1212, let me ask the question, where were the neighbors in all of this? Well, we have an answer, and it's a sad commentary indeed. This coming from a particular news story that came out, which is a local paper. Neighbors in Redlands were shocked that the suspects had ties to their area. One neighbor said, I was in awe that it was happening 4 houses down from my property. So in some respects, individuals might have said, well, we never saw it coming. But if you read on, you read something that is a little bit concerning. A man who had been working in the area said he noticed a half a dozen Middle Eastern men in the area in recent weeks, but decided not to report anything since he did not wish to racially profile those people. Matter of fact, he said, we sat around lunch thinking, what were they doing around the neighborhood? We'd see them leaving when they're raiding the apartment. And so this is another real question about this whole incident and future incidents. And that is, if you see something, say something, right? We've been told that for years. But guess what happens when you say something? Well, then you might get sued. You might get a major lawsuit dropped on you or something like this. Think of the Clock Boy we talked about just a week ago, where after the school district raised some questions, two different teachers saw that this young boy had something that didn't look quite right, and then when it went off in English class, finally decided to call the police. The boy is evasive about that, so they take him away and eventually resolve that it was just a clock taken apart. But now, of course, his father has said he is going to actually sue the school district unless, first of all, the city pays $10 million and the school district pays $5 million. So he's expected to get $15 million. Can you imagine what you would perhaps get sued or even threatened if you called the police and said, you know, I've seen a lot of Middle Eastern men. They've been walking in with big packages. I think a lot of us would just say, I'm not sure I want to get tarred with that. I think some people could be walking in with a Stinger missile, and some neighbors would go, well, just hope it doesn't get fired in my direction, because of the fear. Because there's two fears that Americans have right now. One fear is that an incident like this will happen to them in their community. But the other fear is if I say something about this, I'm going to be labeled Islamophobic. And of course, that is a very significant concern as well. So as we go through this today, that's one more issue on the table. We're told that if you see something, say something. But what would be the political and even possibly the economic cost, and even perhaps the physical cost, if indeed you reported an incident that didn't look right and looked suspicious? Just a minute, I'm also going to talk about whether or not these gun control laws would really make a difference. I've posted a piece here by John Lott, who's been on the program with us before, on mass shootings and Democrats. One about ISIS celebrating the killings with Twitter hashtag, and then one about some of the other shooters and their particular backgrounds. So we'll get into all of that, but as we go along the program, wanted to take some time to get your phone calls. So let's head out to South Carolina first and talk to Danny.
Good afternoon.
What would you like to say?
I would like to say there's a lot of politicians and people asking this question. Why is President Obama making the decisions he's making? I would like to offer this. Back in 2008 and 2012 when he ran, he made this statement. I will fundamentally change America. When you make a statement like that, you are considering changing the foundation of which made this country great. He's embarking on doing exactly what he said he was going to do. He's going to fundamentally change the foundation of which made this country great. The politicians are acting dumb. They're acting stupid, like Mr. Trump is saying, acting as though they don't understand the statement he made. But what really makes me mad isn't so much that he's doing this. Even though I'm a Marine, my dad's a Marine, my two brothers are Marines, and we love this country. But what makes me mad, angry as a Christian, is this. The politicians we send up there to Washington to protect us, to keep this country, and to protect this country, are doing absolutely nothing.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for your comments. And, I'll give credit where credit is due. We have had some of these members of Congress that I think are doing something and speaking out and actually paying a pretty heavy price for it. But there is a solution to that, Danny, and that is, of course, this next election. And even in the next hour, I canceled the first hour guest, but in the second hour, I thought it would be good to get back to some of the things we like to talk about during especially the holiday Christmas season between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Sometimes it's a time I like to look at some books that actually teach us a little bit more about American history. And this one, Common Sense Nation, will get us back to what the foundations were and the very kinds of things that this president has wanted to change that have made this nation great. So first of all, thank you for your service. Thank you for your comments. And let's give a few more of you a chance to join the conversation. We'll stay in the southeast and go to Georgia this time. Antoine, what would you like to say?
Yes, how you doing, Kerby?
Very good. What would you say?
I think we need more security, man, at, like places we go to, man. For instance, like like the movies, the mall. I mean, even if it means like creating, more security jobs where, like, you get a group of folks to secure the whole, the whole area. Then they may do it for maybe 8 hours, 10 hours at a time. Then you switch off, you get another crew to come in. Because it's just it's starting to get out of hand. It all started over there in the overseas and stuff, with all the killings and stuff. But now they're starting to migrate over here, and you hate to stereotype people, when you see, Middle Eastern men or women or children, you hate to just stereotype them, but the killings just got so bad now. You can't help but to stereotype when you see people like that. Because I find myself doing it a lot, and I don't try to do it, but it's gotten out of hand, man. And when you see people like that, and especially if they carrying stuff, that's the first thing you're going to think. What's he up to?
I think you should ask that question. Again, you've raised some very good points, which we'll come back to after the break. I got a piece by John Lott about mass shootings and Democrats is the title of it. But again, it gets into, when we have had these mass shootings, what in particular are the individuals that are doing it? Where do they do that? And I sometimes even want to say to my friends that say we need stricter gun control laws. So what you say is you don't want to put guns in the hands of Muslims, right? Well, no. Well, I say, let's be honest about those that are doing shooting. And I don't want to put guns in the hands of any loner, because those are certainly a number of individuals, including the one that shot up at Planned Parenthood. So anybody that's a loner, anybody who lives alone, probably they shouldn't have a gun. Anybody that's a liberal probably shouldn't have a gun, because if you start going back and looking at the profiles of those individuals, they don't fit the narrative that the media has been trying to use, a white, angry redneck. No, that's not really what's happening, especially if you start looking at those numbers. That's why I posted one particular article that gets into that in a little more detail. But more importantly, when we come back, let's talk about the locations of where this has happened. And many of these shootings, we just mentioned Connecticut with Newtown. Of course, a while back we talked about Oregon. Today we're talking about California. Just recently we're talking about Colorado. Those are places where you have really strict gun control laws anyway. And this is what's happened. We'll be right back.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 844-45-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 844-45-BIBLE. That's 844-45-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Talk about Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik and the killing and the mass shooting yesterday. And if you would like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We talked a little bit about this, so let me get into it. One of the articles I've posted for you today, and I do encourage you to read it, maybe post it on your Facebook page, pass it on to others, is by John Lott, individual that has been a professor everywhere from Yale University, Johns Hopkins. Matter matter of fact, he was on the faculty at the University of Chicago at the same time as Barack Obama. They met each other, and Barack Obama said, "Oh, you're the gun guy," and that was about the sum total of their conversation. But nevertheless, he points out in the middle of his article here that after every mass shooting, Bill Clinton and President Obama have called for comprehensive or universal background checks, which would apply not only to the purchase of guns from a dealer, but also to private transfers of guns. However, it wouldn't have stopped any of the mass shootings during Obama's tenure. Last weekend, Hillary Clinton and others, and certainly Barack Obama and other Democrats, issued their calls for new legislation before anyone even knew how the Colorado shooter had obtained his rifle. He points out that Colorado has already expanded background checks 2 years ago. So had Oregon before the Umpqua Community College shooting in October. France also has a background check system, by the way, perhaps one of the most significant in the world, and certainly one of the most draconian laws in the world, but nevertheless, so too does California, which experienced yesterday's attack. Yet, while the existing laws didn't stop shooting of the very kind Hillary Clinton claims that will actually stop, she uses these failures to justify imposing similar laws on the rest of the country. He points out as well that the American background check system is supposed to prevent the purchase of a gun by anyone who's been convicted of a felony or certain misdemeanors. But now the Feinstein Amendment would also ban the sale of guns to anyone who's on a terrorist watch list. Now you might say, well, that makes sense, except then he goes into detail, which I won't take the time right now because I want to get your phone calls, about people that get put on a watch list. Many times it has nothing to do with the fact that they are actually terrorists, but somebody they want to talk to. And you might recognize that if you're on a no-fly list or a watch list, there's a real danger. Matter of fact, former Senator Ted Kennedy at one time was on a no-fly list, and I know a number of other individuals over the years that found their way on that list, but I'll let you read that whole piece. But I think he just reminds us that most of these shootings we've been talking about have been in places where you already have very strict gun control laws, and nevertheless we have the shootings. Because the bottom line is, if a terrorist wants to get a gun, he or she, as we saw here with Tafin Malik, can get access to it. And of course, even if you have gun control laws and prevent individuals from buying these at gun shops, you can't go into a gun shop and buy an IED, and that's what they found in the garage. You can't go into a gun shop and buy a pipe bomb, and that's what they found there as well. It's kind of like the 12 Days of Christmas. I don't notice they had 12 pipe bombs. They had 11 IEDs. You could make conversation today as we talk about the shooting yesterday in San Bernardino. Let's head to Louisiana this time. KPAE. Ricky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Kerby. Yeah, about the shooting. Now, that he probably obtained his legally since he was a legal resident and he had a legal job. Everything was legal.
Sure.
I guarantee he passed the background check and everything. There's only one, for all the liberal Democrats that's listening to your show, there's only one. Of course, they always want that utopia, total gun control. There's only one country in the world that's 100% effective with gun control, and that's North Korea. So if any of the Democrat liberals wants to move to utopia, that's their utopia. Gun-free zone is in North Korea, buddy. That's the only country that's 100% gun control effective. That's all I wanted to comment I want to make. Thank you, Kerby.
Thank you for your comment. No, we might put China and a few others in there, but you're right. If you're 100%, that seems to be the place. Let's go to Nevada this time, KYCC. Christine, thank you for joining us.
Hi, you make me crack up when you say those things sometimes. I would like to see a Christmas song with that. But
I'll leave it to someone else. I'm not going to do it.
I moved to Nevada from California, where I hate to say my age, but I lived 63 years there. And I have no clue why California is so surprised of what is going on when they reelected a governor that was known for trying to reinstate and give freedom to Manson, who has followed along with everything else that we don't even want to talk about on the radio. But he is just amazing. I mean, California has time and time again, like the puppies that are led by a leash, they've done that. And this is why we moved to so-called Sin City, because we found Sin City much more appropriate a place to live than California.
Lowered your state income taxes, didn't they? Because there's 0 state income taxes in Nevada and one of the highest in California. And just crossing the state line changes everything, doesn't it?
Oh, you've got that right. Oh, my God. And the things that they do there, I mean, what they find to tax you on and then don't give you back anything. I mean, we lived in a city that was supposed to help the government, or the city government was supposed to help with different things, so they taxed you more and more and more, help with the sewer and everything else. I never found such a mess in all my life.
Well, again, I appreciate your comments, and, you know, I, as many of you know, I grew up in California. I remember when my dad ran for the California Assembly, but it was a little different back then. Matter of fact, 2 years after he ran the second time, a guy by the name of Ronald Reagan was governor. Can't even imagine how California has changed since then. And let's take some more phone calls, because so many of you like to join the conversation today. We'll head to Ohio, WGGN. Nathan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for taking my call. I want to say, one, I appreciate your station. Two, I appreciate the way that you can definitely tell where your beliefs lie, but you are so open to both sides. And it's great to hear on the radio, because so many are like pointing to the other side and saying it's their fault. But it's amazing how all these shootings seem to be happening in gun-free zones, or the likelihood that someone's going to have a gun in a senior citizen area, where there's no way that someone's going to be able to take the assailants down. And I have firearms. My 10-year-old daughter I've taught how to shoot because I'm that worried. One, she likes it, but two, I'm that worried. And the Democrats who want to ban gun control, they say that with security around them, with what? Guns on their hips. So if they really want strict gun control, how about you tell them to lay down their arms first, lead by example, and say, okay, we laid down all of ours, now it's time to do that. It's never going to happen. And one quote I always like to say to my friends is, you may not believe in God, that is your right, or that is your belief. You may not believe in guns, and that is your right. But if someone breaks into your house, the first thing you're going to do is pray to God the person you just called to get there with a gun gets there fast enough. And that's really all I have to say. Yeah,
well, we've said this before, but it bears repeating. When seconds matter, the police are only minutes away. And so that, right. And back to your point about the gun-free zones, of course, I've posted this piece by John Lott, and I've certainly had a lot of respect for his research, but he pointed out one in a column a while back, and we have it on our website if you want to dig a little bit, but you could probably do a Google search and find it faster. Did the Colorado shooter single out the theater because it banned guns? Because he points out that shooter in Aurora, Colorado, you might remember that a couple of years ago when they had that premiere for the Batman movie. He went there and he passed 2 or 3 other theaters to actually shoot. And that's because he knew, as far as John Lott can figure out, that there were bans on that particular theater. It had to do with the policy, really, of the fact that the theater was connected to the mall. But nevertheless, he knew that he had a much more likely chance of being able to perpetrate his evil, because no one probably would be packing in that theater because it was a gun-free zone. So just one more piece of evidence that we can put on the table. And Nathan, I appreciate you bringing that out, and thank you for the nice comments. We're going to take a break and come back and take some more phone calls. Let me just give you an advance warning. When we get into the second hour, I might take the leftover phone calls, but then we are going to move into the interview I had planned, at least for the second hour. We canceled the first hour interview, but the second hour interview I think relates very well, because it's a book by Robert Curry, Common Sense Nation, Unlocking the Forgotten Power of the American Ideal. And I like to do this from time to time because, frankly, it's really important to educate all of us about our history and about the foundations of our government. And you can certainly understand, as we are going to take you through everything from the Declaration to the Constitution to the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment, as we go through some of that, recognizing again the wisdom of the various founders and framers of our Constitution. Let's take a break, though. I'll take some more phone calls right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to read a little bit more about some of this, we've posted a few articles, one on mass shootings and gun control. Just been quoting from that, certainly from John Lott. A piece that I've posted here that has the various Twitter tags that came out, the Twitter hashtag for ISIS and what ISIS was saying about this and how ISIS was celebrating shooting. Because some people said, well, they were not members of ISIS. First of all, I don't think ISIS gives out what happened. Of course they did, and there are multiple tweets that you can read there, if you will. They will not make you feel very good, probably upset you dramatically. And then one on some past mass shooters. Wanted to put that out there because, first of all, my commentary next week on Christian terrorism. If you type in the word Christian terrorism, you find all sorts of people on the left talking about this. And after the shooting at Planned Parenthood Clinic, they're saying that, Christians are violent individuals. No, they're not. Well, this particular one talks about the fact that recently the New York Times talked about most of the shooters are actually white men. No, they're not. I mean, and again, we wanted to help you understand that there are all sorts of things being said, sometimes just almost throwaway sentences in editorials. They're just simply not true. And so articles for you to read on the website pointofview.net. Let's head to Arizona this time. KNLB. Sam, thanks for joining us today. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Thank you, Kerby. I don't know if you're aware of Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, of course. He should be well known to all of our listeners, but maybe not. But tell us more.
Man, but on Tuesday, he was on the news and made a statement, which I can quote off a news article. Arpaio says that he wants Arizona's 250 armed citizens to stop terrorism by taking necessary actions into their own hands if necessary. So he's calling the citizenry to step up, and if something happens, to deal with it until the law arrives. That was his statement. You can go Google Joe Arpaio. They got a video of him saying all this. Arizona's got the best open carry laws, I think, in the country. You can carry, conceal or open, doesn't matter. I can come to work with my Glock right on the side, no big deal.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Guns and Ammo just recently, when they rated all the cities and all the states, I'll just look at the states for the moment, Arizona was at the top. Of course, you can imagine what's down at the bottom: California, New York, a couple of places like that. But nevertheless, go ahead.
Safe. Yeah, no, I feel pretty safe that even the nation's top cop here, Joe Arpaio, is asking us to do our job as citizens. It's our job to protect our community and our home first. And then he said, until the law shows up, take them out.
Take responsibility. A lot of people have said, what would have happened if there was somebody that had been armed in that particular facility, the Inland Regional Center? First of all, it probably would have been illegal. They might have had one of those do not carry signs, but let's just assume that that's the case. Could it be that they might have taken out Saeed Farouk before he killed all those people, maybe after he'd only killed 2 or 3? But we do know a story that's come out, and I assume it's true and not apocryphal, that as the person across the street from the Inland Regional Center who did have a carry permit, he came out of his shop with a gun, and at that point, the 2 individuals, that is Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, came out. They saw him, and they went a different direction with the SUV. So, I mean, you can see that even having a handgun in his possession and showing it might have diverted them, but of course that was too late to end the carnage that took place. But there again, Joe Arpaio, and of course a lot of us are familiar with him, and if you'd like to join the conversation, let's take a few more phone calls real quickly before we run out of time. South Carolina on the Good News Network. Eileen, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Kerby. Yes, yesterday I did hear that was the only building on site, on campus, that was gun-free.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and it seems to me that with all of the IEDs, pipe bombs, and the cache of bullets, that there was an overall plan for more attacks, but it sounds like he got angry at that party and took it personal.
That's my theory. I could be completely wrong on this, but I'll crawl out on a limb and let somebody saw it off behind me. And that is, I think there was a plan for something a lot more. But something in that party set him off. Either it was something that somebody said something about Muslims, or maybe it was just a little too Christian, or maybe it was just a little too decadent or something. And so he decided to then suit up, because I think the plan, you don't have all those pipe bombs and all those IEDs still in your garage if this is your last stand. And maybe they thought they would be able to shoot and get away and fight another day. I don't know, but I do believe that maybe there was something that did set him off. So when the president says there were mixed motives, possibly. It's possible. Maybe somebody rubbed him the wrong way and he just lost it at that point. But he had a lot more planned than just going and shooting a few people at the Inland Regional Center. I'm convinced of that.
I agree with you. I think that many people were saved by that action of his, actually.
That's really sad to say, but you may be true. Let me take a few more phone calls real quickly. Tommy in Georgia on the Good News Network. We'd love to give you a chance to join the conversation today.
Yeah, Kerby, I was just asking, what would Obama and Clinton do if they didn't have armed guards protecting them and they just had the billy sticks that the United Kingdom used to have? How long would they last? Because that's what I think. They target in places where they know there's not anybody that's got any kind of arms and all.
As I have said on this program too many times, but I'll say at least one more time, I've never seen a robbery at a gun range or at a gun store, because that is correct. And I just don't understand why they want to target, but then innocent people are the ones that get hurt and all. But here's what I don't understand. How can you protect a nation that has got a door wide open for anyone to come in when they want to, especially illegals and people bringing in arms and all? How can you protect without people having guns, protect your own household? So I just don't understand how Congress can think that we can protect ourselves when they got a door wide open. Well, again, I would encourage people to read our piece that we've posted here, some past mass shooters, to recognize that some of these were natural citizens or naturalized citizens. And in this particular case, Saeed Farouk, was actually born here, although he had Pakistani parents. You just say, when you then start talking about bringing in Syrian refugees, and we have no idea what their background is and no idea really what's in their hearts and minds, and we know that some of them are going to be ISIS agents deliberately infiltrating, this is something we're going to be dealing with for some time. And I do want to encourage us to pray not only for the victims of this shooting yesterday, but pray for your elected leaders. Of course, I heard some of you say I have no respect for any of the politicians. Well, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. There are some that are really trying to bring some common sense, but there are certainly a number of others that are simply unwilling to speak out and even identify things like radical Islamic terrorism, and unwilling to say, all these gun control laws are really not making a difference. As a matter of fact, gun-free zones might even be a target-rich environment. But I think it's important for you to really begin to ask these questions of your elected representatives. We have an election coming up. They're going to be asking for your vote right now for the primaries that are taking place. You need to make sure that you get good candidates that are actually elected in the primaries so you can elect good candidates in the general election. So I put that responsibility back on you, because indeed we are broadcasting to about 40 different states around the country. So find out what's happening in your community and make a difference. Let's take a break. When we come back, I might pick up a phone call or two, but I do want to move on to an interview that I had scheduled, and I think it really will be a good foundation for how do we bring this nation back to what it was intended to be. It's called Common Sense Nation, and it really helps us understand the forgotten power of the American idea. And we like to teach that, and certainly that would be a good antidote to some of the things we've been talking about today. So let's take a break. We'll come back, finish off with a few phone calls, and then move on to our conversation with Robert Curry and his book, Common Sense Nation. We'll be back right after this.
In 2008, we were told that change had come to America. We got change, all right. What do you think about the changes so far? If you're concerned about the direction of the nation, what are you doing? What are you doing to make a positive change? Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360. Give in December and each month of 2016 and help us change lives. Call 1-800-347-5151 or give online at pointofview.net or using the Point of View Radio app. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net. Click on Become a Monthly Partner. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
First hour today, we've been spending some time talking about the shooting in San Bernardino at the Inland Regional Center. And, of course, Saeed, Farouk, and Tashfeen Malik are no longer alive, but we're certainly trying to understand what is taking place. We spent some time looking at everything from gun control laws to a number of other issues. And if you're just joining us, I might just encourage you perhaps to listen to the previous hour broadcast on our podcast, but also to go to our website, pointofview.net. We have some articles on mass shootings and gun control. This one by John Lott, which I think is very well done. Some past mass shooters, as well as ISIS celebrate shootings. So a couple of articles there. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking with Robert Curry about this new book, Common Sense Nation. Some of you have said, you know, this president has tried to fundamentally transform America. Well, a whole bunch of other people have done so as well. And it's sometimes nice to go back to our founding. And as we have done this so often, talk about our history and our political issues. But I thought I'd just pick up one or two more phone calls just to give you a chance to join the conversation. And I wanted to go certainly to Georgia and talk to Bruce. I understand you're a security officer, so give us some perspective if you might.
Okay, thank you first for taking my call. Yes, I'm a security officer. A lot of folks don't realize that we have one of the greatest programs, and that's our own defense. We have a program here that, oh boy, it's such a sudden shock. We have Homeland Security. And Homeland Security, as soon as they heard this beginning to take place out there in California, we were notified here in Georgia to start watching our own areas.
Yes.
And one of the things that folks don't realize, you know, our president keeps trying to say we need to pass laws for gun control and all these other bills that they want to pass. But they fail to realize that tomorrow I could go out and buy a gun on the street through the black market. I could name any size weapon I want. And before 24 hours are gone, I could have that weapon in my hand.
Wow.
And this is one of the things that we need to have more security watches on this kind of thing than worrying about a gun control program. You know, I mean, passing laws and putting market prices on some of our people that do handle these weapons is really kind of a chaos program.
And again, you live in a state where you have maybe more, if you will, more liberalized laws. But here, look at this happened in California, and they have very significant expanded background checks. We just talked recently about what happened in Colorado, Planned Parenthood. They have expanded background checks. Oregon, when you had the shooting there at Umpqua Community College, and let's not forget even the shooting that took place in Paris and the kind of almost draconian laws against arms in France. It doesn't really make a difference. If indeed, as you said, Bruce, if you want to go out and get a gun of any caliber, of any size, within 24 hours, you can probably get it on the black market. That's where we need to really focus our time and attention, don't you think?
You're right, and that's what I'm trying to point out, too. But we as Christians need to put ourselves on our knees and just give this thing over to the Lord. I mean, you know, we can stand there, we can argue, we can fight, but we fail to realize all things are in God's hands. And if we all in this nation would get on our knees we could solve this problem overnight.
Well said.
I have long believed that our Lord has everything in control.
Well, and again, I started the program last hour by quoting from Romans 12, overcome evil with good, and certainly the preaching of the gospel, but also Romans 13, 1-7, that is, we need to certainly obey those in authority. 1 Timothy 2 says we should pray for those in authority, and we certainly don't want to pray for the victims and the families and all that were affected by this, but also pray for our leaders. And as we mentioned as well, Bruce, we got an election coming up. We need to know where these individuals stand, so we're going to talk about that as well. Let me take one more phone call, and then we're going to move on to another topic. But in Georgia, on the Good News Network, we'll keep on for just another minute or two. Patricia, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I believe that, God has already charged this world to give their life to Jesus. He already let us know that all these things will pass away and the Bible will stand. A lot of people still not getting it. You can put all these gods and you can do the blame game. You can have family that has, that was in defense for years and years and years, and that has not done any good. And as far as people are still going to come out. It's like, I don't know if you remember Mission Impossible.
Oh, sure.
Everybody looking at the guns, but what about somebody who put a device in a pen or shoe or something like that? Some defense, we got to even watch the defense.
Yep, and again, I pointed out that just a minute ago. You can't go to a gun store and buy an IED or a pipe bomb. So even if you were to be able to close off, and I do not want us to do that, any kind of gun purchases in America, of course, you have all the ones that are still out there, but there are people are going to find ways to do harm, and there are evil people in the world. But I want to kind of change topics if I can, because in some respects it relates. One of our first callers talked about how this president and others have wanted to fundamentally transform America. And so I think it's good sometimes, as we do on this program, to go back to America's founding. And this book came across my desk. It's called Common Sense Nation, Unlocking the Forgotten Power of the American Idea. Robert Curry serves on the board of directors for the Claremont Institute. He writes for the Claremont Review of Books, The Federalist, American Thinker, and others. And so, Robert Curry, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
You can, of course, appreciate the conversation we had before you came on because of what happened in San Bernardino, but also as we get into the Declaration, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which, by the way, also has, of course, the Second Amendment, and the Federalist Papers. There are some really important principles. So what I want to try to do is give people a little bit of an understanding of America's foundation. And since we're coming to a break, I'll maybe get into it in more detail, because what you want to do is help unlock the forgotten power of the American idea. And we certainly have missed that, and there is a need to come back to some of the basic principles, isn't there?
It's so true.
So we're going to do that, and when we come back, we're going to get into this in more detail. So sit back for just a little bit. We're going to teach you a little bit more about the Declaration of Independence. Where did those ideas come from? These ideas of unalienable rights, and the fact that they are rooted in who we are, and that we are endowed by our Creator with those unalienable rights. And then what about the Constitution? What did the framers really intend in terms of having checks and balances? And then, of course, we know a lot more about what they were thinking, because Alexander Hamilton and John Jay and especially James Madison wrote the Federalist Papers, perhaps the most famous newspaper columns ever written, to defend the Constitution. And then we'll get into a few other issues as well. So this is a book that if you'd like to know more about, you can find on our website, pointofview.net. We also, of course, have a link to Robert Curry to thefederalist.com, which will give you some information that we've been talking about here today as well. And if you can't find the book, if you click on the picture of the book, there's a place where you can order it and get it in hardcover or Kindle. And I think it's some of the kind of reading that we need to do. We need to learn this. We need to pass it on to our children and grandchildren. So let's take a break. And when we will come back, we'll continue our conversation today with Robert Curry. All that coming up right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, the new atheists contend that religion is not just false, but it's dangerous. Sam Harris believes that it should be treated like slavery and eradicated. Richard Dawkins is even more specific. He said, I'm attacking God, all gods, anything and everything supernatural, wherever and whenever they have been invented. Much of the criticism against religion revolves around violence. We do live in a violent world, and religion has often been the reason, or at least the justification, for violent acts. But the new atheists are kidding themselves if they think that a world without religion would usher in a utopia where there is no longer violence, oppression, or injustice. Details matter when you examine religion. The recent terrorist attacks by ISIS should not be used as part of the cumulative case against religion in general, or Christianity in particular. The fact that there are Muslim terrorists in the world does not today mean that all Muslims are dangerous, and it certainly does not mean that Christianity is dangerous. Keith Ward says, no one would deny that there have been religious wars in human history. However, no one who has studied history could deny that most wars in human history have not been religious. And in the case of those that have been religious, the religious component has oftentimes been associated with some non-religious, social, ethnic, or political component that has exerted a powerful influence on the conflicts. Consider that just 3 atheistic regimes of the 20th century, Hitler in Nazi Germany, Stalin in Russia, and Mao in China, are responsible for more than 100 million deaths. Religion is not the problem. People are the problem, and removing religion and God from a society doesn't make it less dangerous. The greatest death toll in history took place in the last century in atheistic societies. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Robert Curry with me today as we talk about his book, Common Sense Nation. It's published by Encounter Books, and we have information about it so that you can order it, or maybe you'll find it in your local bookstore. Let's, if we can, get into the Declaration of Independence, because this is a document that really stands the test of time. It really sort of gives us the why of an American government. And even though at the time they were simply talking about trying to separate from England, there is also a lot of justification that Thomas Jefferson and the other co-authors of the Declaration give us. But I think it's interesting that instead of tying all of this back to John Locke, you talk about the influence of some of the Scottish Enlightenment. Please explain, if you might.
Well, those phrases, unalienable rights and self-evident truths in the Declaration, they come straight from the Scottish Enlightenment tradition. The unknown fact, the forgotten fact is that Jefferson and Madison and Hamilton were all, at the age of 16, they were all being tutored by Scots who'd come to America from Scotland with the ideas of the Scottish Enlightenment. So when they're using these words and relying on these ideas, that's the language and the ideas of the Scottish Enlightenment. And if you understand that, you understand a whole lot about their thinking.
Well, there's also something else that happened in 1776. In addition to the Declaration of Independence, it was a very good year. It was also the publication of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. And so you have not only a setting forth in our country of this idea of a republic with checks and balances, but you have Adam Smith now making an argument for what today we call the free enterprise system, don't we?
They came into the world together. They were twins. They belong together. They're part of the same vision. They're part of the founders' vision for government and society was we included this idea of a free market. So the American system was a political system befitting a free people, an economic system befitting a free people, and that combination is what made it the place where humans had a level of freedom and opportunity unknown before in the world.
Well, also this idea of private property, let's put that together, because government provides you with protection for your private property rights. And those could be physical property, it could be intellectual property, whatever it is. One of the reasons why I think a lot of countries today are not able to achieve this success of America is because they don't have that. But certainly what Adam Smith argued and what the Constitution later, but even initially the Declaration established, was the right of property and also the minimization of government, you know, this idea of laissez-faire. And that is really part of the secret sauce for the success of America, don't you think?
I love how you talk. You got it exactly right. We have to have limited government if we're going to have liberty, and limited government is a necessity if we're going to have the vast freedom for the human individual that America is all about.
What about this idea of unalienable rights? It does seem to me that today we're moving to a time, and I think, Robert, if we were to go into a typical classroom and they were to teach about American government, they would probably say, well, the rights are given to you by the government. The government allows you to have property, and it allows you to have certain tax benefits and those kinds of things. But that's not what the framers intended. They said that these inalienable rights came from the Creator. And I have a fear that, you know, if God gives you the rights, then they are inalienable. They can't be changed. But if government gives you rights, then government can take those away. Isn't that a problem?
It's really a problem. And, you know, I wrote the book for American citizens who love America and want to understand it better. I wrote it for people who are Americans who wish they could understand it better because they didn't get it in school. And I certainly wrote it a lot for these young people who are the victims of public school education and, as a result of it, no longer have the American idea. Can I take a second and read I think it's my favorite quote from the founders?
Go for it.
It's on your point. The sacred rights of mankind are written in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself, and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power. So that's Alexander Hamilton, by the way.
Yes.
And so there it is. I mean, that's the whole idea it's in the Declaration. The Declaration said that our rights are unalienable. They're inseparable from our nature. And they wrote a promissory note in the Declaration that they were going to come up with a government that was dedicated to protecting our rights. The purpose of government up till that time had been, of course, to rule. And the ruler was the king and the queen, and rule was all about advancing the interests of the king or the monarch. But the American idea was we were going to rule ourselves, and the purpose of government was not to rule, but to preserve our unalienable rights.
Now, there's one other element to that, and that is all men are created equal. Many like to point out the fact that at the time when that was written, there was not equality, but that certainly was the goal. That was the dream, if you will, of the founders, and even later of the framers of the Constitution, wasn't it?
Absolutely. My favorite thing about that phrase, thanks for bringing it up, is we say it all the time, created equal. What does that mean? Created means there was a creator. Means that we're the children of God. I mean, if you read the Declaration, it goes like this: all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. I mean, when people say created equal, they frequently don't stop to think, oh, if we're created, that implies in the language that there's a Creator. And there he is right next to created equal in the Declaration.
Which I think is kind of interesting because, if I might digress for just a minute, some of my civil libertarian friends, especially my secular friends, say, you know, you're trying to read too much religious stuff into the Bible, from the Bible into the Declaration of the Constitution because, they don't mention God or anything like that. And I always point out, well, really, actually, they do. Let's look at the Declaration for just a minute because they talk about appealing to the supreme judge because they want to make sure their motives are right. They were calling for a divine protection because they were going to go against the greatest military
military power of the 18th century. They talk about nature's God, nature's laws, the laws of nature, nature's God, and of course that's when the Creator. If I count it right, Robert, 4 different times God is either mentioned explicitly or implicitly in the Declaration of Independence. Pretty good for a bunch of atheists, don't you think?
Yeah, well, they certainly weren't. And he's given pride of place right there in the part of it that we all hear and think of all the time.
Yeah.
And about the Constitution, there's not a lot of Here's what John Adams had to say about our Constitution. Our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. So the founders believed that if our system was going to work, if the Constitution was to survive, if we're going to continue to live by their vision, what was required for the Constitution to succeed and thrive was a moral and religious people using the Charter of Liberty to govern themselves.
Again, we look at the Declaration, kind of tells you the why of American government. The Constitution tells you the how. And they also recognized that, indeed, people should have liberty, but they also had, I think, a healthy fear of what you might call sin nature, because James Madison in Federalist Paper number 51 said if men were angels, no government would be necessary. But if angels were to govern men, neither external or internal controls on government would be necessary. But he goes on then to say that because we don't live in a world where the angels control us, we need to have to come up with a rival countervailing ambitions. And so this is the whole idea of checks and balances that were actually instituted to protect us from powerful men or women taking too much control of the government and thus becoming a tyrant.
That fact is so important and often overlooked. I mean, up until the time of the founders, the idea was, and it was preached constantly, was that sovereignty couldn't be divided. The king had to have sovereignty, and it had to be undivided. So when the founders said, for liberty to exist, we've got to disperse power and create rivalry within government, so that in order to preserve liberty, that idea of dispersing power through the government, through the different branches of government, and giving each branch of government a different power, that is an incredibly radical breakthrough idea. They were thinking outside the box, which was sovereignty is the king. I mean, Louis XIV said it best, didn't he? I am the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so to take the idea that power needed to be dispersed in the government in the way the founders did, this is a radical, totally amazing breakthrough in human thought.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, though, we'll get into that in a little bit more detail because, of course, Lord Acton said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And there was a real fear about that. But also, again, talking about some of the religious ideas, Paul Johnson, we've quoted him before in his book, The History of the American People, said, George III was not far off when he called the American Revolution a Presbyterian revolution. So we're going to talk about, where indeed James Madison learned some of his Calvinism from John Witherspoon, and what are some of the ideas that came to be in the Constitution and are written up in the Federalist Papers. We'll continue our conversation with Robert Curry and his book, Common Sense Nation, right after this.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your health care. For your free information guide, call 844-45-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical health care. Call 844-45-BIBLE. That's 844-45-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Robert Curry as we talk about his book, Common Sense Nation, Unlocking the Forgotten Power of the American Idea. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. But probably you'll just want to sit back and listen as we try to, from time to time, focus on some of the important principles of our founding and the need to return back to them. Robert, you talk about the fact that the framers of the Constitution aim to preserve our unalienable rights, which you talked about in the Declaration, by preventing the concentration of political power. And you certainly see James Madison in Federalist Paper number 10, Federalist Paper number 51, and other places really working to try to come up with a republic that, on the one hand, provides a great deal of freedom and liberty, but at the same time prevents the concentration of political power, which could lead to tyranny.
That's the big idea. The you mentioned the Presbyterian connection between
yes,
just before the break, and that Presbyterian connection was particularly strong with Madison. He went to Princeton College, called the college in New Jersey in those days, but it's today's Princeton. And Princeton had been founded by the Presbyterians to train their clergy for America. So John Witherspoon came from Scotland. He was a Presbyterian minister as well as the professor and president of the school, and he was answering a call to the missionary field to come and train the clergy. Well, Witherspoon took Madison under his wing. He mentored him, and Madison left Princeton deeply convinced of the importance of religious liberty, and that's what fired his decision to enter politics and explains his whole political point of view.
Sure.
When he went back home, Baptist preachers had been arrested for preaching in Virginia. He was outraged by that. At the time, Virginia had a religious toleration law, which was modeled after England's, which meant that the Anglican Church was the approved church, and approval to preach could be granted or denied by the state. That outraged Madison, who held out for the vision that we have, that is America today, where we believe that we don't have an established church, and we believe in religious liberty.
You know, there's something else I might just point out in passing, and that is John Witherspoon, not only his teacher, not only a professor, not only a pastor, if you will, he's also the signer of the Declaration of Independence. And so you see that as kind of an interesting thing, because today sometimes, Robert, we hear people saying, well, we got to separate church and state. You know, religious people can't get involved in politics. And yet when you look at some of the individuals that served on George Washington's staff, you look at some of the individuals that signed the Declaration, you look at some of those who were later the 55 signers of the Constitution, a lot of religious people there.
And written in a very religious spirit. You know, the thing about Witherspoon he wasn't just a signer, but his speech actually galvanized and convinced the other delegates to sign the Declaration. They were hesitating. To sign that thing meant treason. He stood up and in his thick Scottish accent said they had to do it, and he convinced them, and they all rapidly signed it. One of the funniest things about American scholarship, I'll bring it up, I hope it's interesting, is it's very good scholars, I have books here, very good scholars say that Witherspoon signed the Declaration and the Constitution. Well, it wasn't true. He wasn't a delegate to the Constitutional Convention.
No.
But very good people who really know what they're talking about say that. And it's a very understandable mistake, because his ideas so pervaded the constitutional debate and the discussion that it's almost as if he did participate. And that common mistake, which you can find pretty often in good books about the founding, is interesting, I think.
Yeah, well, there are a few that did sign both, Benjamin Franklin, a few others, but let's get back to maybe the negative, because we've been talking about the positive, but in this you talk about the fact that the goal was to separate power, and yet you spend some time talking about the fact that today most regulations come from federal bureaucrats who are unelected, unaccountable. And this is certainly not what James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, George Washington, anybody really planned. And that's exactly what we have today. And that's maybe why you are starting to see this transformation of America in a way that the framers never intended.
It's exactly true. I mean, no one actually knows even how many of these administrative law, so-called laws exist. I mean, the number is so great, and it's such a complicated matter that we don't have an accurate count. One guy who tried to count it came up with a number of 300,000 laws that aren't really laws, that are just edicts by the administrative state. That's certainly not what the founders intended, and they certainly didn't intend for legislation to be 3,000 pages long for the Congress to vote on it without reading it, and then the administrative state spending 5, 6, 10 years writing out the regulations that make that thing go from 3,000 pages to 20,000 pages. I mean, this is post-constitutional government or unconstitutional government.
Sure. Let's talk about one other aspect, and that would be federalism, and you talk about this as well. Even Lord Acton talked about federalism as coordination rather than subordination, association rather than a hierarchical order. But the reason we have the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Constitution are in large part to say that not all the power is delegated to the federal government. Certain powers are delegated, enumerated powers, but the rest of those powers are what? They're reserved to the states and the people. We also have a problem not only that we have unelected bureaucrats who are unaccountable making so many laws, but we also have the federal government doing much more than the framers ever intended for them to do. And as a result, the states don't have the kind of countervailing balance that was intended when the Constitution was written.
If you think about it, the states got together and their delegates agreed to surrender certain powers to the federal government. The federal government would deal primarily with states, with relations to foreign states, and also with relations among the state governments that the Constitution created. So that was the states made an intelligent decision to surrender those powers, which could best be handled by a government working for all of the states. But the idea was, and the guarantee and the promise and the contract was, that the states would retain the powers that they didn't specifically surrender. That's what the 10th Amendment's all about. My favorite amendment, maybe the 9th. My 9th and 10th, my favorite two amendments. And that's just gone. The 10th Amendment is a dead letter. The states are more and more functioning like they're one of the regions in France or someplace where the central government tells them what to do and even tells them how they have to spend their money.
Wow. One other issue I thought we'd put on the table if we were to take a break, and that is the idea of an exceptional America. And you quote from de Tocqueville, who traveled this country, and sometimes it takes a Frenchman or an Englishman to see what we can't see as Americans, but there is no country in the world in which the boldest political theories of the 18th century philosophers are put so effectively into practice as in America. Only their anti-religious doctrines have never made any headway in that country. And so the point is a lot of those very good ideas, some of which came from the European continent, actually became part of the American experience, except those anti-religious ones, Rousseau, Voltaire, those kinds of things like that. And so there was a belief in kind of an American exceptionalism even in its founding, wasn't there?
Absolutely. It's always been true.
And so it seems to me that we need to come back to that, because the average young person today, they find in their history classes all the errors and all the evils of America. They never hear about the greatness of America.
The interesting thing about that quote is that how it goes accepted all the time. Because the philosophers of the Enlightenment that the founders followed were the philosophers of the Scottish Enlightenment, and those guys were not hostile to religion. In fact, they were mostly they're very religious, and most of them were ministers. The Enlightenment of the French Enlightenment was hostile to religion. They were atheists, but those were not the philosophers the founders listened to. So they didn't. It wasn't that they took the political ideas and didn't listen to the religious ideas. They took their ideas from a tradition that was not against religion.
Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll spend just another few minutes talking about what about the progressives and the liberals and the left and how they have changed the definitions of this country and really maybe modified or altered
hopefully not irrevocably, the very foundation of this country and what we can do to maybe turn that around. So if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. And we'll continue our conversation with Robert Curry, Common Sense Nation, the Unlocking the Forgotten Power of the American Idea. It's an encounter book. You might be able to find it in your local bookstore, but since it is one that might not be in your local bookstore, we also have a nice link to it on our website, pointofview.net. We also have information about the Federalist, because after all, Robert Curry also writes for example, the Claremont Review of Books, the Federalist, American Thinker, and much more. So again, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll come back and conclude our conversation today about a common sense nation. Stay tuned. We'll have more right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Talking with Robert Curry, Common Sense Nation. Let's take a phone call real quickly. WLPG. Brian, thank you for joining our conversation today.
Well, thank you, Kerby. Appreciate you on your show. I'm calling to ask about how one mobilizes one's church, how one even motivates one's church to pray about many of the things that we discuss on your program. Generally, when I've asked for prayer about, say, the imminent collapse of the dollar or other things like the Benghazi crisis or the things about Islam, encroaching Islam I'm more or less told to just shut up and pray about things like somebody's liver operation or whatever.
Well, first of all, I might mention that one of the things we have done at Point of View is we have our Pray for America campaign, and you can go to the website, pointofview.net, hit the search engine since it's not on the front page. And first of all, we have these Pray for America brochures, so you could get some copies of that. And we're going to revise them. We had these, of course, developing, encouraging people to pray for the Supreme Court on the decision about same-sex marriage, but we have the general material about the various verses on prayer and those kinds of things. So that's one idea. The other, of course, is I would encourage you that as you get emails from us, because we have various action items and things like that, pass that on maybe to someone that you have a email for and say, isn't this worth praying about, as well as taking action on it? And again, I think those are some obvious ways in which you can encourage people to recognize that these are important issues facing our nation. So those are a couple of ideas. Maybe I can try to come up with a couple more by tomorrow, because we'll have our weekend edition. Penna Dexter will be with me. Michael Berry. We're going to probably spend a fair amount of time talking about the shooting at the Inline Regional Center in San Bernardino, but we also have some positive stories, some victories on religious liberty, and a number of other things we'll talk about. But maybe we can get into that in a little more detail tomorrow. So I'll see what I can come up with between now and then, but be glad to send to you, and you can write for our Pray for America brochures. And, of course, just even type in the word Pray for America in the search engine, and you'll find some of the material that we have available to you if you haven't signed up for it. Just before I run out of time, though, Robert, I want to talk about this issue of progressives, the modern progressives, because what you have pointed out in the latter part of your book is that there has been a very deliberate attempt on the part of certain politicians, certainly some academics, to change our whole view of the Constitution, of the Declaration, and of America. And this is, I know, why you wrote the book. You want to try to educate this next generation who have been deprived of some of this important information, and you certainly want to educate the parents and grandparents so they can pass it on to their children and grandchildren. So talk about the threat that we've faced from the progressive movement over the last century.
That is exactly why I wrote the book. Thanks so much for asking that part, Kerby. I mean, we have a feeling, don't we, that under the progressive onslaught, America slips sliding away. And I think there's a lot of truth to that feeling. But think of it this way. What if tomorrow 66 or 67% of Americans woke up and they had a good, clear idea of the American idea? Not just a good feeling about it, but they actually understood it in depth. And what if those 66 or 67% of people also were reawakened in their dedication to the American idea? Well, what that would mean is that the nation is healed from the disease of progressivism. And in short order, the government, which now people consider to be corrupt, inefficient, and kind of scandalous, would quickly be put in order. What that means is it's up to us. We can't wait for somebody to come from outside to rescue us. We have to rescue ourselves. That's why I wrote the book, and that's why it looks the way it does. It's a thin volume. It doesn't have a lot of words. It's brief and clear. The first part is written by me. The last part is written by the founders. The first part are 8 simple chapters, and clearly written, I think, that will help you understand, help the readers understand the part the founders wrote, the Declaration and the Constitution, which are included in the book. If we can get enough people, the reason I wrote the book is, here's the hope. If enough people can get the idea again, we can heal ourselves of progressivism and heal our government of progressivism too. The progressives are simply and clearly all about governing without the Constitution. When a reporter asked Nancy Pelosi, what part of the Constitution makes Obamacare constitutional? She said, are you kidding? She didn't defend it as constitutional. And the idea of the founders was that would be the first question that was asked by legislators.
Sure.
Somebody would come up with an Obamacare idea, and they would look at it and say, oh, that's not constitutional. And they wouldn't waste any more time on it. It'd be over. We'd be moving on to real problems.
And you also point out that a lot of this goes all the way back to Woodrow Wilson. And so, there are some that say, well, that started with Bill Clinton or started with Barack Obama. I mean, a lot of it started with Woodrow Wilson. And here's a good juxtaposition of 2 quotes that you put in the book. I mentioned Lord Acton, who said, power tends to corrupt,
and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he was really kind of one of the patron saints, if you will, of the Constitution and others with his British background. But Woodrow Wilson said, I cannot imagine power as a thing negative and not positive. So we've changed from we need to protect the American people from all powerful individuals to a mindset that said, no, I deserve all the power because I know what's best for you. And so whether it's a politician or a bureaucrat, you have a lot of individuals today that are pretty much convinced that they're doing the right thing, and you just need to go along with their ideas, and they need to concentrate more and more power in their particular sphere so they can do the right thing. Framers absolutely would have been horrified by that mindset, and yet that's pretty much the mindset we have today, isn't it?
It is, and it really did. I think it makes sense to make Wilson the number one there. He was the first American president to openly declare that he rejected the Declaration and he rejected the Constitution. And he thought power was a good thing, but all this effort to disperse power through the government that the founders had worked so hard on in the Constitution, that was bad, because what it did was it prevented the concentration of power in the president's office, so the president could get the things done that he needed to get done, according to him. And we see that pretty much the basis of what Obama's doing and saying he's doing, and the basis of Hillary's campaign. She wants to govern, and they want to govern around the Congress and around the courts.
Yes. Well, again, this is why we need to come back to the common sense principles of a common sense nation, and that's why you wrote the book. And I appreciate you joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you so much for having me on. I think that your listeners might be interested by what you said about it if they aren't interested by what I've said about it. The book's a lot. I hope they won't judge the book by its author. It's a lot better than I am.
I might mention, too, the foreword by Victor Davis Hanson has been on the program with us as well. And if you'd like more information, you can certainly click on the See More button, and that will take you to information about Robert Curry, also information about thefederalist.com, but most importantly, information about this book, Common Sense Nation. If you'd like to order a copy or maybe even get it for a Christmas present for a young person and ask them to read it, and give them a reward if they do, they will be a lot better for that education. So again, we are running out of time today. Let me mention tomorrow is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter, Michael Berry will be with us. We'll certainly be spending a fair amount of time talking about the mass shooting in San Bernardino, but we'll bring a couple of other stories as well to you. And so I hope that you will join us for the 2 hours tomorrow. And if you'd like to listen to any of the broadcasts we've brought this week or even the one today, you can visit the website pointofview.net. Click on the button that says watch or listen. If you'd like to listen to it, you can even download a podcast and listen to it at your leisure. If you'd like to watch it, of course, you can watch it as well, as we've had guests in studio with us, even yesterday, O.S. Hawkins, and that is something you can watch on our YouTube channel. So it's all available to you, as well as many of the various articles that we have written, including my Viewpoints commentary. So go to the website pointofview.net. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris. We will see you back here tomorrow for our weekend edition.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 844-45-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 844-45-BIBLE. That's 844-45-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.